Welcome to the Client Generation Podcast, a show where we interview some of the most successful people in real estate to help you understand how to generate leads, build a brand, and convert more clients in your business. What's up, everybody? Grant Wise here. Welcome to the Client Generation Podcast. Excited today to be interviewing longtime friend Brian Curtis, who is a real estate savant. He's kind of all things, man. He's a broker owner, team leader, real estate coach, just a fantastic human being. And I'm excited to jump in and have a great conversation. I know you'll take a lot from it today. Brian, thanks for being on the show.
Awesome, Grant. I appreciate that. I'm not sure I can live up to that intro, but I definitely do appreciate it.
It just hit me like right before the word savant came out of my mouth. I was like, I'm going to say that. And I'm probably not even saying it right, but that's all right.
That's the right word. I'm just not sure that I qualify.
Oh, man. Well, for those people that may not know who you are, why don't you give us just a quick backstory, man? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started in real estate in 2001. I actually sold timeshare. Those of you from Arkansas will know Bella Vista and Cooper Communities. That's how I started my real estate career. And, you know, in the state of Arkansas, you're required to get a real estate license. So I got a real estate license in 01 and started selling timeshare. I did that for a few years, did a couple other things. And then I had the brilliant idea to open my own brokerage. And I'd never sold a piece of general real estate. By the way, I would not advocate that. That's probably not the best way to do things. That's exactly the opposite of what I teach people to do today. So I had my own independent brokerage for 5 years, at which point in time I merged with a company called Exit Pro Realty that doesn't exist anymore. Exit Pro Realty became Market Pro Realty. Market Pro Realty became Keller Williams Market Pro Realty, and at which point in time they bought me out. I stayed at KW for about 5 years, built a team there, and then in 2018 decided that it was best for me to go out and start my own brokerage again. So I restarted HomeQuest Realty in 2018, and it's been going strong ever since. We have a team of about 30 agents, and then we got another 10 to 15 just agents who aren't on our team who work at our brokerage. And then I'm also in the mortgage space. I was in the mortgage space in starting in 07, got out of it in 2010 when the whole thing kind of crumbled around us as we were doing all these crazy loans and all that kind of stuff. And then I got back in the mortgage business again in 2018, and I do that as well. So also, as you mentioned, I do some coaching and consulting. That's actually my real passion. So I've done it for my team and people who work with me. And then, I also do it for agents across the country.
And I love it. That's awesome. I didn't realize you got started with Cooper Communities. My grandfather helped start Cooper.
Really?
Start Bella Vista. Worked at Cooper for a long time. He passed away when I was right just before I was born. I think it was maybe a year old. I don't remember, but I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I tell you what, there's some stuff that you can learn. I don't advocate timeshare. I mean, there's good and bad things about it, mostly bad. But I can tell you what, you can learn how to sell something. If you want to go sell timeshare for 6 months, you'll walk away from that, assuming that you take that stuff in, you'll be a heck of a lot better salesperson than you
You'll walk away knowing how to deal with rejection. You'll walk away to know how to deal with emotions. You'll walk away knowing how to deal with a lot of stuff.
It's a crazy business. I don't want to ever be in it again, but it was fun.
Man, that is awesome. Okay, so you are, one of the things I love about you, man, is you are a practitioner of all things. Like you not only are performing at a high level, producing at a high level, you love to try new things. You're very progressive in the way that you go out. You're always into stuff early before everybody else knows about it. How talk to me about some of the wins and the losses. I want to hear both, but I know you got into Zillow early. Like I know you got into Facebook ads early. I know you got into a lot of stuff really early that panned out. Talk me through some of your wins being, kind of an early adopter, and why are you like that? Like what part of your business mind is like, yeah, I got to go get into this early. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Well, there's a guy, I can't remember his last name, but he used to do penny stocks back in the day. When I say back in the day, before I was grown, 80s and early 80s, kind of penny stock guy. And what he would do is he'd go out and he'd buy, say, 10 stocks that were penny stocks, and 8 of them would completely go out of business, but 2 of them were gigantic home runs. And I was like, that makes sense to me. So, the great thing about it, you talk about Zillow. So I bought my first Zillow lead in 2011, and Zillow was completely different back then. As a matter of fact, I was telling somebody this the other day, and maybe it was you, I don't remember. But I would buy like $300 a month at Zillow, and I would show up on every listing in Northwest Arkansas. It was a great deal. And I learned pretty quickly that I was going to get this phone call. Hey, this is Grant. I'm looking for 123 Main Street. It looks like you're the listing agent. Tell me about it. Well, I wasn't the listing agent. I was just a guy who paid $300 to have my picture next to that, and somebody would call me. So I just found that what my goal was to get my phone to ring with people who are interested in real estate conversations. So I tried Zillow, and it worked great for me. And there's a lot of bad things that have happened with the industry and Zillow, and I don't want to go down that road. That could be a very negative podcast. But at the end of the day, they were leads, and they were people who wanted to talk to me. And that's one of the things. And Eric Eby is a great agent on our team and a good friend of mine. He's actually our principal broker of our company. And he said this to me one day. We had a lead source we were going to, and we went on like 5 appointments with this lead source, didn't list a single house, kind of crappy. And I was like, hey, should we just not do with this anymore? He said, no, Brian, I'm having real estate conversations. And it's funny, that was after I've been in the industry for 12 or 13 years that Eric said that to me. And it really kind of rang true with me, is how can I have more real estate conversations? So you talked about Facebook leads. And so I got into Facebook in 2014. And, by the way, if you have something that's working really, really, really well, double, triple, quadruple down on it. Because if you want to talk about mistakes, I would love to go back to 2014 and take my Facebook ad budget, and instead of it being $500 a month, to be $5,000 a month. Why? Because back then, as far as I know, and I'm sure there's someone in our market who would say, oh, I was doing it too, but I didn't see a single other Facebook ad in 2014 except for the ones that I was running. And so people didn't get overwhelmed with it. And so it worked, and here's another thing I did prior to that. I did Craigslist. Like Craigslist back in the day, when you could put URL links in Craigslist and create lists, that was fabulous. But what I'm saying about this is Zillow worked fabulous in 2011. Craigslist worked great in I don't remember what year. I want to say 05, 06, 07 to about 09 when they decided you couldn't do those links anymore. That worked great. Then Facebook worked great. Nowadays, we're still doing some Facebook. But if you've got something that's working for you, you've got to double and triple down on it, because guess what? Unless you're going to be crazy like me and try everything under the sun, it's going to work for a certain period of time, and then it's not going to work anymore. Back in the 80s, stuff worked for 10, 15 years, right? Because things weren't moving quickly in real estate. Nowadays, I mean, whoever thought I was going to run an Instagram ad? I didn't, but I run Instagram ads. There's always something new. TikTok. I haven't really gotten into TikTok, but I interviewed an agent the other day, and she's crushing it with TikTok. I'm not going to do this number. It's really not my thing, but she's great at it, and she kicks butt at it. So the reason I've tried all these different things is because I'm looking for something that works. Now, sometimes I lose some money. I mean, I've gotten several lead sources where I've lost $3,000 or $4,000, and that hurts, but it was worth it. And sometimes in business, you have to take some chances. You got to figure out what's that next thing that's going to bring me an opportunity. And that's kind of what we're playing with. So that's been my approach for the last, say, 10, 15 years.
Man, I love it. I love everything you said. One of the things in particular is, when you find something that's working, you've got to double, triple, quadruple down. And I think that is something that people do not do enough of. When I say people, I'm talking about real estate agents. I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm going to call that out. Like, I want to make sure I say that people in real estate, people that buy and sell houses, don't do enough of that. And one of the things that I've kind of uncovered is, I have this little quotes: data is the language of business. Okay. And if you can learn to speak the language of business, you can be very, very, very successful. One of the things that we have to stop doing is operating a business based on gut feeling. Yes. Sometimes when you go to try new things, there's a gut feeling, I'm going to try this. But ultimately, whether that works or doesn't work is in direct correlation to the data that you produce from doing something, right? You go buy $300 worth of Facebook ads this month, you generate 80 leads or whatever. Like, there's going to be data that comes from that will communicate either if it's working or if it's not, how to improve it, so on and so forth. And if we can stop trying to operate a business based on the way we feel, some real estate agents would literally be 10, 15, 20 times more successful, because your feelings are going to lie to you very often. Like, I don't always feel like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to the gym, but I do it anyway. And so you've got to really dig into that principle. I think is one that it's done me a lot of good. I know it's obviously done you a lot of good, but stop relying on your gut feelings. Maybe you rely on it to try something that you feel might work. But once you get into actually doing some stuff, whether it's calling, whether it's knocking doors, whether it's Facebook ads or TikTok ads or whatever comes about next, Apple ads, rely on data to help you make decisions. Don't rely on the way that you feel, because your feelings are going to mislead you in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to calculate return on investment, that's the very first thing that in essence, you go from gut to math. And I just call it math. It's data. Everything is data. I agree. Data is the most valuable commodity in the world. If I knew what the real estate market was going to do at any given point in time, I could be retired and not have to do a podcast with Grant. No, but very seriously though, I mean, if you'd have known in 2006 that the market was going to crash in 2008, you could have become very wealthy. And if you would have known that the market was going to blow up in 2020, once again, you could have become very wealthy. So information is the most valuable commodity in the world. I've said that for years. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing is we have to, but it's funny. So people all want more information, but then we give them information, they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So every real estate agent should know the exact amount of money they spend on marketing per lead source. This much on realtor.com, this much on Facebook, this much on whatever. It doesn't really matter. Whatever that source is. And then over a 6-month period, you should be able to see I spent $1,000 and I made $12,000. Yep. Great. That's a 12-to-1 ROI. That's absolutely fabulous. And that's not the official way to calculate ROI, but if you keep it simple, like, technically you subtract and divide and all that that doesn't matter. Just for every dollar you spend, you should have a return that you're looking to get. For me, for every $1 I spend, I want to make $6. And that doesn't mean if I've got a lead source that only makes me $3 that I'm not going to keep it, because I do. Some of those, high intent lead sources, your Zillows, your realtor.coms, the return on investment's not as good as Facebook, believe it or not. It's just that agents really like those. And as I run a team, I try and keep agents happy as they go through that process. So like, yeah, I want some of those come list me, come show me a house leads. And that's where they come from. And then we mix in some of those others that they got to work a little bit harder on. But at the end of the day, if you're got a lead source and you're 1-to-1, that means that you're working for free. For every dollar you spend, you make $1, then okay, you broke even. No, you didn't, because you worked for X number of hours to convert that lead. You lost money. So the absolute line in the sand for me is 3. And that really is a very low line. And I'll do 3 on listings. Why? Because listings, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly the return on investment on listings, because I got 2 leads off this listing as well. And those 2 leads turned into buyers. So that's a little, one of the areas that I don't have an exact formula, except that I'm willing to take a 3-to-1 on a listing versus a buyer. I want at least 6.
Well, not to mention the referral revenue that comes on the back end of buying, opportunities, because the ROI is probably far greater for all of us than we realize. With some of those,
right? Because past clients and fears, I don't have to pay a lot to keep in touch with those people. There's so many systems nowadays that'll keep in touch with those people for free, and that's consistent. And here's another thing that I've realized over the last, say, 5 years. 10, 15, 20 years ago, people transacted every 5 to 8 years. That's not true anymore. People are transacting every 2 to 3 years on the average now. That transaction, for whatever reason, I don't know, somebody smarter than me can figure that out, but I can look at the data and say, I used to have to follow with people 5, 6, 7 years before they transact. Now, sometimes we're looking at, 24 to 36 months. So the life cycle is a lot shorter, and that's beneficial for us as agents.
Yeah, it helps if your home appreciates in value 19% in a single calendar year.
That doesn't hurt. I agree. Definitely. You wake up every night and hey, I made $100 last night. What'd you do? I went to sleep. That's a pretty good deal.
Owned a home and I went to bed. That's it. That's awesome. So I'm sure, and this is obviously being sarcastic when I asked this question, but I'm sure all you had to do was buy leads. Isn't that what made you successful?
Absolutely. Just write a bigger check and you get more leads. No, it's funny as we talk about that. And I think you probably know this, but like I run a role play class every Friday from 7 to 8. We role play for about 15 minutes, and that's one person's the agent. I'm usually the buyer or the seller. And then we talk about that for 45 minutes. And the reason I bring that up is I want people to understand we had a 15-minute conversation that we talked about for 45 minutes. Why do I find that to be relevant? Well, because the majority of people that I listen to, and I listen to phone calls all the time. You were on Cash Call the other day, and that's basically a show where we listen to phone calls and critique. And we're pretty nice usually. Sometimes we get a little harsh, but my point is, I don't think that 95% of real estate agents who I know have been taught how to communicate. I know that seems like an extreme statement, but I came from a world, we talked about this earlier, timeshare. Timeshare, you get 90 minutes to convince somebody who walked in the door for $100 bill that made this, they looked at their significant other or said it to themselves if they were single, no matter what he says, no matter what he offers, I'm not buying it. So you have to learn how to take that person who didn't want what you had and actually made a pact not to buy it, and in 90 minutes get them to sign on the dotted line and write you a check. So that's pretty hardcore sales. We don't have to do that as agents, but there's tools that you can use from that hardcore sale that are pretty good. Like, I listen to calls all the time. I listened to a call the other day. It went like this. Hey, this is so-and-so. Zillow connected us. Great. When would you like to see the house? Today at 3:00. Perfect. I'll see you then. That was the entire phone call. Now, on its face, there's nothing wrong with that. We got an appointment. That's great. But what's the chance that that guy didn't hang up and talk to Grant, and Grant booked him another appointment? Then he hung up with Grant, and then Bob booked him. I mean, there's more to this. We have to show value. And one of the things I think that a lot of us old school guys forget, when I started in this business, you would literally put people in your car back then. So I put somebody in my car, unless I really was a jerk or did something stupid, they didn't go find another agent, because Zillow didn't exist. Realtor.com didn't exist. Heck, the Lindsay website didn't exist in like 2007. That's a big brokerage in our area. So there was no place to go find an agent outside of driving around, calling signs, or getting a referral. So as long as you didn't screw up, they stayed with you. Guess what? Nowadays, when you buy a lead, it usually gets sold to 6, 7, 10 other people. And so I tell every agent, assume that the other person, that your client is talking to 7 other realtors. So I've got to be different, and I've got to be better. I've got to communicate with them in a way that goes, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing. So one of my big things that I think people need to do is take control. And what I mean by that is you need to be in charge of this transaction. You're asking someone to spend 2, 3, 4, 5, $1 million of their money. Do you really think that they're looking for someone to go, take a look at the house and let me know what you think? No, they want you to direct them, to lead them, to show them value. And so many times, I think HGTV ruined this for us. How many times do you watch HGTV and the realtor standing in the backyard, and they walk out of the house and they go, oh, tell me what you liked about the house? That's absolutely ridiculous. Be in charge. And if you're not going to be in charge, then somebody else like me is going to come along and steal your client, because someone who's in charge, that's appealing to people, whether you believe it or not. It's confident and it's professional. Think about all the other professions you deal with. Can you imagine go sitting with your attorney about something and they go, well, what do you think we should do? No, your attorney has a plan. He's going to show, he or she's going to show you what's going to do to move forward. We have to do the same thing as real estate agents.
Man, I love so much about what you said. You're talking about the difference between learning how to sell and learning how to communicate. And I mean, and I know doesn't seem like a huge difference if you're just listening to that like at face value, but learning how to communicate has so many different applications for the way that you can use it in your life as a tool. And it is a tool. Communication is without question one of the most valuable tools that I think, skill sets that you can possess, because it will teach you how to do a lot more than just sell stuff. And
Right.
it's so valuable. And I think like one of the things you got to pay attention to is story framework, right? We talk about stories a lot, obviously at Whitley, because we're always talking about lead generation and branding and conversion. But one of the things you want to pay particular interest to is the role you play in somebody's story. Like if you're listening to what Brian says, he says, contrary to what you believe, people want to be guided. People want to work with an expert. And when you look at like story framework, I use the Hero's Two Journeys most frequently, which is a framework I learned from Russell Brunson, which he learned from somebody else. And it's the basis for, I think they say, every Hollywood movie that's ever been written, right? But if you look at it in real estate, essentially the Heroes 2 frameworks is the journey of accomplishment. The Heroes 2 frameworks, the Heroes 2 journeys is the journey to accomplish something, and then the journey to be transformed. And at some point throughout the story, a guide shows up and helps somebody overcome a challenge so that they can achieve whatever it was that they set out to achieve. Well, let's tie this back to real estate. Well, let's say I'm thinking about buying or selling a property. Well, okay, I set out to achieve something, right? I want to sell my property, and I go through this process of listing it and doing this and doing that, doing the other thing, and maybe an agent lists it for a while. And obviously this isn't happening in this market, but sits on the MLS for 6 months and doesn't sell. And I don't know why, I don't understand. So I've got this problem. Now I've got a challenge. I'm trying to sell my property and it's not selling. I don't know what's happening, and so on and so forth. Well, then comes in Brian, and Brian is an expert. He has great marketing plans. He has great advertising strategies. He runs an open house. He gets everything filled up. We sell the house in less than 30 days, blah, blah, blah. Like, the point of that is, as an exercise, you grow to understand your role in the transaction. It is not to be the hero in somebody's story. It is to set them up to be the hero in their own story. Most people are trying to accomplish the American dream. Most agents are trying to accomplish, I don't know what, self-interest. It's also selfish.
Trying to get paid.
Trying to get paid, man. Yeah, that's probably accurate. And if you're listening to this, like, I'm not trying to put you down if you're a real estate agent. What I'm trying to help you understand is you play a very specific part in someone else's story. And if you understand that, you then start to take on a different role. Communication becomes a very necessary skill set for really communicating value, communicating your expertise, communicating your compassion, communicating, that you care. There's a lot of different ways that you can take what Brian's saying and apply it to your real estate life. And in understanding that role that you play, understanding the role you play in story is so important, because whether you think about it intentionally or not, you're not only living a story out, you are helping somebody else do the same. And
Absolutely.
So the framework is just crucial to your success in that process, in my opinion, based on what
Let me give, and along those lines, let me give you the best question that I ever learned to ask. And I know that sounds extreme to say the absolute best question, but I will stand by this until someone proves me wrong. It's the simplest question. And I bet you in 1,000 real estate transactions, it might get asked once or twice. What are you looking for in an agent? And because, again, stop trying to give them what you think they need. You're not Steve Jobs. You're not inventing the iPhone. You're not going to tell everybody what they should want and need. That's not our role. So find out what the other person wants, because usually they will tell you exactly how to sell them. And so, the word sell is a 4-letter word, right? But we're in sales. It's okay. Own it.
Yes.
Great people if you look at most successful people in the world who have made a lot of money, they did it by selling something. Mm-hmm. So sales is not a bad word. It's okay. It's just, we have this thing where we're going to say, oh, it's all like Glengarry Glen Ross. We're just going to go in there. We're going to close them. We're going to trick them. None of the things that I do are about that in a day-to-day basis. It's just about what can I do? Oh, well, I expect you to answer the phone every time I call. Well, that's probably not that's an unrealistic expectation. But if I don't answer that question right there and say, look, Grant, I appreciate that. And I promise if I'm available, if I'm not with another client, I will answer my phone. But understand, you're not the only client I have. I wish I could work with one client a month and pay my bills. It's just not good math. So with that in mind, is it okay if I promise you as long as you call me during business hours that I will call you back by the end of the day? If you call me after business hours, I'll call you first thing in the morning. No, that's great, Brian. No one's ever said, no, you need to answer my phone right now. But they may have had an expectation that was unrealistic, and I get the opportunity to challenge it. Yep. Or, discuss it, and I say this all the time. You
also get the opportunity not to set unrealistic expectations, because when you're out there desperate for business, oh yeah, I'll answer the phone every single time. And then you don't, hey, guess what? You set yourself up to fail.
Well, and also, if you're going to be a person who answers their phone at 10 o'clock at night, guess what? You have to answer it every single time at 10 o'clock at night. Because once I've answered my phone at 10 o'clock at night, I've set that expectation. So I tell people I'm not going to answer my phone at 10 o'clock at night. It's not going to happen. Now, if it's, the night before closing and there's something wrong and someone sends me a text message, oh my God, then I'll probably call them at 10 o'clock at night. But that's the other thing that real estate agents somehow along the lines we've given up on. If I sent, you had a real estate company at one point in time. If I sent an agent at your real estate company offer at 10 o'clock at night, is it going to get presented? No. So why do I need to send it at 10 o'clock at night? Why do I need to set these false expectations for myself? And every agent I talk to who's doing well, the better they do, the more frustrated and irritated they get because they haven't built any kind of boundaries. And, it's funny. I tell people literally, you can text me 24 hours a day. And I mean that you can text me 24 hours a day, but please understand about 9 o'clock at night, my phone goes on do not disturb, which is why I don't care if you text me at 4 o'clock in the morning because no big deal. I don't get up. I don't get up at 4, to be honest. I get up at 5. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll check my text messages. Oh, look, I got to return these. It's no big deal. But people understand that. And you set the right expectations up front. And even more than setting them is figuring out what their expectations are. It's like a roadmap to make a client happy. And that's what we want, right? We want to keep our clients happy so that they don't go work with one of those other 7 realtors who are calling them.
Man, it's such a good takeaway. There's been so many good takeaways on the podcast, and I want to respect your time, but we've talked a lot about, lead generation opportunities. And I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about how, it's not just about buying leads. You need to have a great sales process, and even more so have a great communication plan, have a great skill set that you develop. I think I've probably invested well over $100,000 in my sales education alone in the last 8 or 9 years. I think it's such an important tool. I think it's one of the most important in the entire world. Now, I grew up, my whole family was in sales. And so I had a little bit of a natural pushing along, but I still felt the need, when I was really getting started early, to invest in myself through, mentors that I had in Australia that I always love and admire, through the Cardone trainings, through other platforms, and through other people, through getting to connect with top producing people like yourself, and just listening, and learning and absorbing. I learned so much here today. I hope everybody else did. But that's such an important skill set. I think it's one of the most undervalued. And I think if somebody happens to stumble upon this, that is going to college, trying to get a psychology degree, finish and then go right into sales, because you're going to kill it. I guess I would say if I was going to get a college degree today, I would get a doctorate in psychology. I'd go the whole way. Now, knowing what I know in my 30s, I've obviously will probably never do that. But the study of human nature and human behavior is one of the greatest skill sets from a sales standpoint. And when you learn how to communicate with people and understand them, it's so powerful. And then setting the right expectations. That sounds like a really simple thing, but it's something that a lot of people don't do. A lot of people do not set expectations for themselves, for their clients. Brian, I'm sure there's a few dozen other topics that we could dive into. I'm probably going to have to get you on the podcast or do a Facebook Live with you, or get on a second interview, or do a Facebook Live or something. But always such an insightful conversation, man. I really appreciate you being on the show.
I appreciate it, Grant. Thanks for having me. It's fun. I love to do this stuff. So I'm welcome. I'm more than excited to come back at any point in time. And this is what I love to do. Coaching and training is my passion. And, it's funny. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure you've read the book. And, one of those habits is sharpen the sword. And those of you who haven't read it, that basically means learn some more stuff all the time. Yes. Get better at your craft. I laugh, I'm a big sports guy. And I think about this. How often could you imagine, Tom Brady's 44 years old, whether you like football, hate football, whether you like Tom Brady or hate Tom Brady, you got to kind of respect what the guy's done. And the thing is, that guy practices just as hard today, and he works on his skill set just as hard today as he did when he was 23 years old and just graduated from Michigan. So it's funny, real estate agents, we go to real estate school, we go learn some stuff, and we're like, we're good. I can tell you right now, I set aside a minimum of 5 hours a week for learning. And people think I'm crazy when I say that, but there is so much, I don't know about you. I feel like this is comfortable. I feel like neither one of us in our entire life will get the opportunity to learn everything we want to learn. There's just not enough hours, but you've got to make that a priority. And, This is one of my favorite things to say. There's only two ways to close more deals. It's either talk to more people, and nobody wants to do that, or just do better with the people I'm already talking to. And that's what communication and sales skills is all about. And don't be afraid of it. It's not a 4-letter word. Sales is a 5-letter word. So we'll go with that. And just go out there and learn and grow. Listen to stuff like Grant has. I'm sure he has lots of great people on his stuff, and just figure out a way to just get a little bit better. There's a book called Atomic Habits, and they talk about getting 1% better. Guess what? If you get 1% better every day, that's a pretty high percentage at the end of the year, right? And you don't even need to get 1% better every day. You get 1% better every month. I'm 12% better than I was 12 months ago. That's amazing. Yeah. So many opportunities out there. There's so much good free stuff nowadays too. That's the other thing that's really amazing.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. So much wisdom in everything you said. I think I'll always live by that. They say that Socrates on his deathbed said, the only thing I know is I know nothing. And when you wake up every day like a student, man, it's just unbelievable what you can go out and accomplish. I heard Les Brown over the weekend say that a statement closes off the mind and a question opens it. And
Love
so
that.
Just keep asking great questions every day, friends. Brian, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you a ton. What's the single greatest way somebody could connect with you if they wanted to learn more about you?
You mentioned that at the beginning before in our green room. And I think probably the simplest way is just find me on Facebook and just send me a Facebook Messenger message. I'm Brian Curtis. Just send me a Facebook Messenger. I don't check them every minute, so don't expect me to respond in 30 seconds. But I check my Facebook Messenger a couple times a day because that's just the simplest way to communicate. You can send me an email. It's going to get lost in spam. You can send me a text message. I may or may not see it, but Facebook Messenger is probably the simplest way to get a hold of me. So I'm just Brian Curtis. There's nothing special about my name or anything like that.
We'll link up your profile in the show notes, and we'll link up a few other ways that people can connect with you if they want to do that. Thanks again, Brian, for being on the show. It's much appreciated, my man.
Thanks, Grant.
Thank you guys for continuing to listen to the Client Generation Podcast. Hope you got a ton of value from this episode. Screenshot that you're listening. Tag us on Instagram at LikeGrantWise. What was your best takeaway from the episode with Brian? We'll see you on the next one. Peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Client Generation Podcast. Please make sure that you rate and review this episode so that we can continue to bring you more incredible guests to help you grow your business. Thanks, and have an amazing day.